There are moments when you know you are capable, when you have the experience, the understanding, and the ability to handle what is in front of you. And yet, there is still a quiet voice somewhere in the background that questions whether you are truly ready, whether you are as confident as you appear, or whether at some point someone might see through you and realize that you are not as certain as they think you are. It is not always loud and it does not always stop you from moving forward, but it lingers, just enough to create hesitation, just enough to make you pause longer than necessary. Even in situations where logically you know what you're doing. And what makes this even more confusing is that this does not only happen at the beginning of something new. It often shows up when you are growing, when you are stepping into something bigger, or when you are moving beyond what has previously felt familiar. That is what I want to explore today. Because self-doubt is not always a sign that something is wrong. It is often a sign that something is changing. If you reflect on what we have been exploring over the last few conversations, from people pleasing to the need of approval, and then to overthinking, you will start to notice how naturally these patterns connect. Because once the mind becomes focused on how we are being perceived, and then begins analyzing everything in an attempt to get it right, it eventually leads to a deeper question. Am I actually good enough? And that is where self-doubt begins to take shape. What is important to understand is that this doubt does not always come from a lack of ability. In many cases, it appears at the very moment you are expanding, when you are stepping into something that requires a different level of thinking, responsibility, or visibility, and the mind is simply trying to adjust to that unfamiliar space. There is a well-known reflection from Maya Angelou, who once shared that despite her success, she often felt as though at some point people would realize she had somehow managed to convince everyone she knew what she was doing. And when you pause and consider that, it becomes quite revealing, because it shows that even those who have achieved remarkable things can still experience self-doubt, which tells us something important. Self-doubt is not reserved for those who are unprepared. It often appears in those who are evolving. I began to recognize this more clearly in my own journey, particularly during phases where I was stepping into roles that required more visibility, more decision-making, and a different level of responsibility. From the outside, it may have looked like a natural progression, something expected, something aligned with my experience. But internally, there were moments where I questioned whether I was truly ready, whether I had everything I needed to handle what was coming next. It was not constant, but it was present enough to notice. And what became clearer over time was that this doubt was not always rooted in reality. It was often shaped by comparison, expectation, and the assumption that I needed to feel completely confident before moving forward. But that is not how growth works. Growth rarely feels comfortable. It feels unfamiliar, and because it feels unfamiliar, the mind interprets it as doubt. There is also a connection between self-doubt and awareness. People who are more aware, more reflective, and more conscious of their actions are more often likely to question themselves. Not because that they lack capability, but because they understand the impact of what they are doing. The challenge is that this awareness can sometimes turn inward in a way that becomes critical rather than constructive. And instead of making or asking, how can I improve? The question becomes, am I good enough? And that shift changes everything. And this is where most people stay stuck. Not because they do not understand what is happening, but because they do not pause long enough to step back and see the pattern clearly. Because the presence of doubt often feels like a signal to stop, when in reality it may simply be a signal that you are moving into something new. Once I began to see it this way, something started to shift. Instead of trying to eliminate self-doubt, I started trying to understand it. And that changed how I responded to it. I realized that confidence does not come before action. It comes through action. And waiting to feel completely ready before moving forward often keeps you in the same place. Because that sense of readiness is something that develops over time, not before you begin. I also noticed that self-doubt begins to lose its intensity when your focus shifts. When your attention is on how you are being perceived, doubt increases. When your attention is on what you are contributing, clarity increases. That shift may seem subtle, but it changes the entire experience. You're no longer trying to prove yourself. You're simply showing up and engaging with what is in front of you. If this resonates with you, it may be helpful to notice the next time self-doubt appears, not as something to push away, but as something to understand. What exactly feels unfamiliar? What is actually creating the hesitation? Because once you identify that, the situation often becomes clearer, and clarity allows movement. Not in the absence of doubt, but alongside it. If you feel like this is something you've been experiencing, where self-doubt is quietly affecting your confidence, your decisions, or the way you show up, then this is exactly the kind of work I explore more deeply through my Clarity and Confidence Reset one-on-one sessions. These sessions are not about quick fixes, but about creating the space to understand your patterns, build clarity, and move forward with greater intention and self-trust. If that feels relevant for you, you'll find the details in the description. If this conversation resonates with you, I would genuinely like to hear your experience, because self-doubt is something many people carry quietly, and sharing perspectives often brings a different level of understanding. If you found this helpful, take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. And if you would like to continue exploring these conversations around self-awareness, leadership, and personal growth, consider subscribing so you do not miss what comes next. In the next video, we're going to explore boundaries and why even capable and confident people often struggle to hold them, especially in the environments where expectations, relationships, and responsibilities are constantly overlapping. Until then, simply begin to notice when doubt appears, not as something to resist, but as something to understand. Because more often than not, it is not telling you to stop. It is simply asking you to grow into something new. I'll see you soon in the next video. Stay inspirited, stay happy. Bye.